Chapter 102, Alimony Demands. Days passed, and the family court judge summoned Han Hyunaki, through his lawyer, about Reeler's wish to be legally separated from her husband. They were to meet in the judge's sala with Reeler's lawyer to finalize the petitioner's request for legal separation. When asked if the legal separation petition by his wife, Riel, was acceptable, Hyunki could not say a word because of shame and guilt. So the judge continued, legal separation is granted by the court so that, if the petitioner decided to be wholly separated from the respondent, she could apply for a marriage annulment. But in the meantime, both parties were not allowed to get married while the separation was still in effect. However, you have ample time to fix your marriage and settle your marital problems. Still, if the petitioner or both decided to continue the separation, then annulment must be granted. However, while still legally separated, the husband, which is you, Mr. Han, having aggrieved the petitioner, must give alimony to your wife and child. Silence among them stood, until the lawyer laid out the demand of the petitioner. Mrs. Gabrielle Han. Here is our demand, Mr. Han. The petitioner now demands $1 million monthly for the detriment you caused in your married life. In addition to that demand, Mrs. Han requires full rights in your shares in the City Town's commercial bank and the K-Mall Corporation. Thus, the owner of these shares shall be transferred to your son, Hyung-sik, until of age. In the meantime, Mrs. Gabrielle Kalmahan will act as your son's steward effective to the family court judge's approval date. Everyone around gasped and was astonished about Reeler's demand for alimony. Hyun-ki was staggered. He never expected that his wife could be that keen and piercing. After a few minutes of silence, he complained in a lower voice, "You could not do this to me, Riel. I have worked so much for those shares," Riel cut in. "That's why I am getting it for my son's future. Rather than having it wasted to your lover's whims, it is only lawful for my son's rightful benefit to acquire those things, since his blood flows from your bloodline." Hyun-ki was so embarrassed by the way his wife had confronted him. "We could still dispute your shares, Mr. Han, since these demands will still be reviewed by the family court judge," assured Hyun-ki's lawyer, Attorney Kizon. Counselor Wilson argued, "I won't waste my time with the petitioner's demands if I were you, Attorney Kizon. Your client is a multi-billionaire. Those demands were just a tiny fraction of Mr. Han's net worth." He was complaining because of humiliation, but not truly from the alimony demand. In fact, the judge might add some more to what we are originally asking, because of the gravity of Mr. Han's detrimental behavior toward his wife. "Don't be fooled by your sly client," Attorney Kizon gave a croaky sound, amenable to Attorney Wilson's opinion. "And about the custody of your child, Mr. Han, your son will be under the care of your wife, but you would be given visiting rights. Mrs. Han would allow you to see your child for an hour, and visit twice weekly Saturdays and Sundays. That is your wife's demand," Counselor Wilson added. "But that is unfair, Riel. He is my son, and why do you restrict me from seeing my child? And now you're complaining. Have you visited your baby while he was in my womb, even just by a simple touch? You only did a few times, but not as much as was expected from you. You preferred and enjoyed touching your mistress, but deprived your son." Riel blasted in anger, showed dismay and irritation, and Hyunaki bowed his head in defeat, and was gobsmacked. "Please sign all the documents, both the respondent and aggrieved parties. I will submit this to the family court and let us wait for the approval. In the meantime, please act civilly toward each other, so there won't be more complications, while we await our petitions hearing." "Thank you," the judge requested. Riel thanked Counselor Wilson for standing up for her. Counselor Wilson positively replied, "I am most honored to help you, Mrs. Han, and you deserved it. You truly made a good fight. Mr. Han has learned his lesson, and honestly, he had the fright of his life." After the session, Hyun-ki felt terrible about what transpired during the hearing. He could not be with his son like most fathers do, as well as being with his wife. He felt so lonely, and his guilt almost overshadowed his entire being, reflecting on his wrongdoings and misdemeanor that lead him into thinking about how to regain Riel. That pain in his heart was too much to contain. He couldn't control his emotions with muffled weeping. Then he suddenly remembered his condo at the Pacific Plaza. He recalled that Junie found Riel in his condo the day of her wedding with Hwan Chul, and found notes that Riel wrote when Junie once visited his condo to accompany the cleaners for monthly maintenance of his place. He ignored Junie's report then, because he was focused on Sarah until it completely slipped his mind. He quickly flew back to the metropolis, to his Pacific Plaza condo. As he opened the door, He already felt the gloomy atmosphere in his place. It had been too long since his condo was visited. This condo was his and Reeler's love haven. He looked behind the door where a note was posted as Junie saw it. It was still there, saying, "I'm so sorry. Hyun, I missed you. Love." Riel. Something sharp pricked his heart, and as he trotted towards their bedroom, he saw the sticky note on his pillow, saying, "I missed us," signed Reeler's name in Korean. He felt downcast, feeling his longing for Riel. And now, Hyun-ki was guilty of hurting her, replacing Reeler's love for Rosemary. He reflected, and realized he had never loved Rosemary. It was just a mere physical attraction. He admitted to himself that it was greed, a romantic interest because, admittedly, he was afraid to make physical contact with Riel, who became pregnant. Moreover, couldn't stand her morning sickness, her bloated appearance. Admitting to himself that was his fault, a grievous mistake. He cried out so hard that day, the very first time in his life, having cried this much out of love. Never had he wept for a woman, only Riel made him vulnerable, like what he is now. He was now thinking, how could I make amends? How could I make up for all the shortcomings and guilt towards my wife? And my son? I had been negligent towards our baby, oh my lord. What will I do? After getting into the right mindset, he returned to the global city to find a way to make amends with Riel. It was a fine Saturday morning, when Hwon-chul and Hyun-ki accepted Akio's invitation about the business their fathers wanted to pursue. They were to meet in a hotel restaurant for the lunch meeting. The secretaries of KORH&H Manufacturing Corporation were preparing the meeting venue. It was 11 in the morning when Akio came in earlier. With him was Riel, and being his executive assistant, saw to it that everything, especially the documents, was placed strategically for the business partners within reach. When they sat for discussion, Akio sat by the table while Riel went to see her son playing in the hotel playground with his nanny. Hwon-chul came in with his fiancée, Patricia, followed by Hyun-ki. They were discussing and signing their final agreement when a little boy came running to their table. When Young-sik saw Akio seated, he ran shouting, "Papa, Papa." Akio moved his chair and, with open arms, took Young-sik in his arms. Witnessing how his son was so affectionate of Akio made his blood run cold, and Hyun-ki felt appalled. Hwon-chul and Patricia were surprised. Then Hwon-chul quickly asked, "You got a son? When did you marry?" Akio replied, "No, I'm still single." This little tyke here was Reeler's son, your nephew. Hwon-chul and Patricia were astounded. Reeler's son? How? Then Riel came in, surprising Hwon-chul and Patricia the more. Riel, with a Duchenne smile, said, "Hi, Chul and Trisha." Calling them by their nicknames gave them goosebumps. "Riel, you are alive," shouted Hwon-chul, and he quickly embraced her, tears shedding from his eyes. How did this happen? Why only now?" Riel asked Hwon-chul. It had been a long story, but to make it short, Mom's doctor friend saved my son and me from dying. And Akio had been there for me since day one, and never left my son. He took good care of him, as a father should. Riel glanced at Hyun-ki mockingly, as Hyun-ki felt slighted and couldn't look straight at Riel. Akio was his godfather when he was christened. Young-sik calls Akio Papa. Isn't that amazing? And while they were chatting, the little boy approached Hyun-ki and tagged Hyun-ki's pants, calling him Dad-da. To Hyun-ki's amazement and the rest, the boy again called him Dad-da? Dad-da? He wondered, then asked Riel, "How did he know I was his dad when we had only met once?" Akio was quick to answer. While the boy was growing up, Riel kept showing your pictures and videos of you and Riel, telling him, "That's your daddy. There's daddy." Riel had never deprived his son of knowing you, despite having the little boy recognized Hyun-ki and called him Dad-da. Can there be a good chance of getting back together as a family? Keep following the exciting Windows of the Heart series on my TikTok and YouTube channels. Thank you.